We don't know yet what it is going to look like out of them. Right off the bat here, we do have a difference in team compositions as they are getting started with their very first pull here. We know both teams are going to like to pull a lot of mobs back here onto this Venthyr Lantern. Perplexed are playing that Death Knight, whereas Piami have clicks on that Moonkin, and I love the Moonkin in this dungeon with Bolstering Necrotic this week. I would give Piami an edge here from seeing the composition difference between these two teams. I think I like Piami's position.
Yeah, so I personally agree that I like the Druid for the utility, especially because this dungeon is so difficult with the affixes. But I do think that the DK should be having overall more damage. So if Perplexed can actually manage to deal with all of those affixes and all of the mobs without needing that extra utility from the Druid, then theoretically Perplexed should be having the edge. But we've seen almost all teams struggle here, so that's going to be really hard for Perplexed to be able to not have any sort of issues, especially if you're missing those Force of Nature, that Vortex, that Typhoon to help you out with the Necrotic and with the Bolstering, and also being able to keep everything on top of those lanterns, the Venthyr lanterns that you need to be using properly to get that buff.
Yeah, it is a crucial part of this dungeon, especially because those Venthyr Lanterns were buffed coming into patch 9.0.5. They last longer, both in the buff and in the time that they are open on the ground, which means getting good value out of them is even more important than ever before. As we can see Piami getting started with this massive pull. They're going to use Bop on Rentari here to let him group everything up without having any danger there. It means the rest of the group has to stay out of combat until it is all grouped up, but a really good job there of then into that Solar Beam. They are preventing these mobs from doing stuff as much as possible there. Then the Sigil of Silence, Sigil of Misery, the Dragon's Breath, all committed here, and that's going to prevent the ticks from getting too many of those Engorge casts off. And beautiful execution of the pull there by Piami. They are spawning their Pride, but so are Perplexed. Perplexed spawning their Pride milliseconds after Piami, and these two teams neck and neck here. 0 deaths in this first little part of the dungeon, and that is not easy to do. We've seen in earlier series teams accumulating 15 deaths between them before this point in the dungeon, so credit to both teams so far having this worked out, having this first difficult part of the dungeon worked out. As you can see, Piami walking towards that boss there. They're looking to get a little antsy. Maybe they're going to get in combat with this boss before the Pride even goes down. Looks like, okay, now oh yeah, right before the Pride goes down, they are getting right in there, and there is the Time Warp coming out from them, so they are getting started on this boss fight a solid chunk of time ahead of where Perplexed will do it, and they have a little bit more single target damage theoretically with the Moonkin, although Celestial Alignment not going to be available potentially until right as that Pride buff is falling off, so maybe that actually will not be realized on this boss. I mean, but look at the boss health here. It's already 40% as Perplexed are pulling it. Oh my goodness, the damage.
It does a huge amount of damage by Piami to be able to deal with this Pride so quickly, even though Perplexed did spawn the Pride just a second or two after Piami. It took them quite a lot longer to deal with it. So definitely Piami being ahead at this point because they dealt with the Pride earlier, but Perplexed having so much single target damage as they're really close to just catching up to their time. And I mean, incredibly well done by both of those teams so far. A couple of trash packs before the first boss really have been trash packs that teams struggled with and had wipes too. So well done by both those teams. Perplexed did play, I think, one extra tick, so they're up to 21% compared to the 20% from Piami, but that shouldn't be making a huge difference later on.
Yeah, some teams have had different ways of approaching this dungeon, but I think usually it does end up being the same total amount of pulls regardless of how you do that. You just get to slightly mess around with which mobs are in which pulls and whether you pull like a bat during the final gauntlet or not. And that can certainly matter, and there's definitely a right answer, but it's really hard to tell what that right answer is. And whatever it is, much more important is going to be the execution of whichever strategy you have chosen. You can see Piami already starting to walk their way forward here. These mobs are getting pretty low on health, but this is not the scary pull. The scary pull is going to be the next pull that we see here. It is such a difficult combination of enemies that they are going to be doing right once they can finish this one off. You can see Rentari starting to kite there, Divine kiting as well on the side of Perplexed. Perplexed actually finishing off their pull ahead of where Piami are, and they are getting started now with this really scary pull. Perhaps, oh my goodness, no they are not. Perplexed are going slow here. They are just fighting this 3-pack all by itself. Piami are going for it, though. They are risking it for the biscuit. They are running into that little room there, and Rentari casting the Fell Devastation, and they are going to be fighting a lot of Overseers and Depressors all at the same time here. So a completely different strategy between these teams. This is so risky for Piami. It's such a bold pull, but if this works out, they will have a huge time advantage over Perplexed.
Yeah, that's a double Overseer pack plus the Oppressors from the inside room that Rentari just all gathered up here. You see the chains coming out of the Overseers, not even outranging it. Dr. G just standing there, tanking the damage as they're confident in their healer to be able to out-heal it. And they know the Overseers have to die quickly. Of course, we also have Bolstering. You see this Overseer is actually hugely bolstered. This Overseer needs to die quick. Otherwise, if the bindings come out of this Overseer, then that can cause people to die. So there we go. They didn't manage to finish off and proc the 40% Pride. So yeah, that pull really paid off for Piami as they got a huge amount of stacks here from that Lantern and also have the Pride now as well.
Ryzen went down for Perplex as well, so that's going to cost them their battle res. And so Perplexed actually doing this in 2 pulls, whereas Piami have figured out a way to do it in 1, and Piami didn't have any deaths here. And I cannot overstate how impressive it is. This pull is the pull that wiped Echo earlier in their series in this dungeon. So the fact that Piami have executed it so quickly and so cleanly, 0 deaths, I mean, this is a tremendous advantage that they've got now. In addition to that battle res and those 5 seconds from the death on the side of Perplexed, I mean, they already have this Pride buff and they are running into this room already, whereas Perplexed are still just working on that Pride. I mean, Piami, I'm so impressed by the fact that they were able to pull that off. I'm amazed by the fact that it worked, and I'm amazed by how bold they were to attempt it and to have that in their route, especially given how wrong it went for Echo yesterday.
Yeah, that was incredibly clean by Piami. Now they're also pulling this Overseer pack into the mini-boss. They also have an advantage here because they have the Soothe from the Moonkin, who can actually soothe off the Enrage effect from these neutral mobs that the mini-boss casts. Without the Soothe, they're gonna have to be killed, which Perplex didn't seem to have an issue though. Actually, no, there we go. You see the neutral mob in the back that they have to be fighting here. If they had a Soothe effect, it would already be dead because it also removes the HP that they gain from the Enrage effect. So a little bit of a time loss for not having that extra Soothe, while Piami is already gathering everything up on this Lantern. But Perplex, I mean, they're really close behind.
Yeah, Perplex actually have done a really good job of efficient damage prioritization here, which means that even though they've done this dungeon in an extra pull now relative to Piami, some of those pulls they've managed to do a little bit more quickly. And I mean, still, Piami have the lead here, right? Piami have finished this pull, whereas Perplex still have it at 50%, but it is not a huge advantage. And I mean, that just goes to show how insane it is to do that big pull that Piami did, even though it's only for a pretty small time advantage and it's such a scary pull, but it did give them that time advantage. So they are now working their way over towards the second Venthyr Lantern. And what they are really trying to do here is roll this buff over. It's a 75-second buff that they've gained from that first Venthyr Lantern, and ideally what they want to do is activate the second Venthyr Lantern before that buff expires and refresh its stack. So you'll see Igloo, the only Venthyr player on Piami, will have the responsibility of clicking on that Lantern in a sec. He is a little zoned out right now, though, as there is all of that puddle between him and the Lantern. No way for him to get there without taking that damage. But you'll see he's actually Door of Shadows through it. Wow, the Venthyr utility. Just completely insane. Does have to dodge this red swirly, though. And did he find time to activate that Lantern? I'm curious. I'm not sure if I saw him finish the cast, and no, he didn't finish the cast. So he's going to have to go and reopen it now. And I'm not sure if they've actually extended their buff here or not. And you can see, looking at the count now, both teams on the exact same count already. And Perplex actually massively ahead now. They've already killed this Pride, whereas Piami have just started fighting it. So somehow Perplexed have done this section of the dungeon just faster than Piami.
So, okay, the difference was that Piami actually pulled the Sentinel previous to the 60% Pride proc, and Perplex is pulling it now. So the pull that Piami is doing now should be quicker, because Piami took a long time because of bolstering, so they had to single target the Sentinel before they could AoE everything down. And Perplex is doing that Sentinel pull now, but they have the Pride buff now, so it should be easier for them to deal with. So a little bit of a difference in pathing, actually putting Perplex ahead. Piami had to deal with that Sentinel pull without the Lantern buff and without the Pride buff, and Perplex just did it the other way around. And they had all of those buffs, meaning that the Sentinel pull was then a lot faster. And now they're up to 67%. But look at Piami, they are now done with that trash pack as they're up to 72. So both of those teams are so close to one another.
But look at what Piami gets to do now. They have all that Lantern buff and this Pride buff to take into Executor Tarvold, so that is going to be extra damage for them, and that means that even though this boss was pulled at around the same time for both teams, Perplexed got there maybe 10 seconds later, Piami have gotten to deploy so much extra damage here, and so actually, they lost some time up front but that rewarded them with setting up only easy trash for later in this ring, right? They got to do all of that trash all together, AoE it down, because they took out that Chamber Sentinel. And yeah, great job there by Piami, identifying that way to save the time. And they're gonna be rewarded here with a faster boss kill once again. Although I'm curious whether this boss 2 split is actually going to reveal much of a difference in times here between these two teams, because we know that Piami gained time on the boss 1 split. And I think the boss 2 split is actually going to be a gain for Perplexed. Looking at the boss health percentages here, it is still melting for Perplexed.
And they're 4% ahead in trash. So it's actually going to be, it might actually be one less pull for Perplexed after this boss. Well, Piami has to do 4% somewhere, right? So
Piami's
even though
doing
the
it
boss
right
is
now.
going to go down. Oh yeah, they're pulling it on top of the boss. Okay, so I have the Frenzied Ghouls, which is actually really dangerous for Antari, because they do a lot of damage to the tank, and they also stack up that Necrotic, so that's actually very dangerous, but they managed to do it. But not sure how much time they're going to be saving with this, because the boss died already, and they still have to deal with those ghouls.
Yeah, and they are actually, wow, the boss 2 split 7 minutes and 30 seconds for both teams there. Exactly the same time through this section of the dungeon, although Piami still had to finish this trash off right after the boss. So when you factor that in, when you factor the time to get to 74% and kill the boss, it is Perplexed who actually gained time in that section, and I am floored that happened. The fact that Piami was able to execute that massive pull onto that first lantern of that section, and still ended up not having a faster split through this area. And wow, look at what Perplex is up to as well. Perplex is pulling all this trash, whereas Piami have gone right into the boss. So once again, we have a difference in strategy here. So Perplex is going to be reaching that 80% Pride threshold, I believe, and they will then be killing that and taking it using it to help kill the boss as fast as possible. Whereas Piami have said, nah, we are going right into the boss right now. We are CCing all of the mobs in this room, and we're just going to kill the boss, and then we will be taking these mobs upstairs with us and killing them with the first mobs on the trash pull at the top of the stairs. And I think, once again, what that's going to mean is that Piami is going to have one fewer trash pull in this split of the dungeon compared to Perplexed. The question is just going to be if they are able to actually realize a time advantage this time, because they somehow weren't really able to last time.
Yeah, this time around, I mean, I do like the fact that they're pulling all of this trash in this room on top of the next trash pull, as you said, just having one less overall pull, but it takes time to set up, right? You have to get all of that CC and those trash. Then once you go up, you have to put that ring of, you have to put the ring from the mage down, Ring of Frost, then you have to wait until all of the mobs are gathered. It's gonna take a while for them to gather up that pull. So maybe the time that you lose from having to gather it all up might not actually be worth it. We're gonna have to see what's happening after this boss, as Perplexed is now, of course, already done with that 80% pride and the trash in this area, and they got the boss down to 45%. Of course, you're also missing the pride buff as well on the boss with the way Piami is playing it, but they gained the pride for the gauntlet area at the start. So different kinds of strategies here as they now gather up all of this trash in that Ring of Frost, and you can see that the setup time takes quite a while, right?
Yeah, but so Piami is going to get the advantage of having the pride for the start of the general call trash gauntlet, right? They're going to kill the pride after this pull, and then they will have that massive buff for the first little bit of the general call trash gauntlet, which is a scary part of the dungeon. I mean, Necrotic with that set of trash and Bolstering as well are both extremely difficult affixes, even though they don't, they've made it work such that Necrotic and Bolstering aren't as bad as they just would be if they affected everything in that area, but they still affect enough of that trash that it is extremely, extremely sketchy with this combination of affixes. So Piami will have the benefit of that prideful buff for it. Perplexed will not, but Perplexed are getting started on this trash pull, and I expect that both teams will be starting the general call trash gauntlet at basically the exact same time. So this is a neck and neck race, and this is so incredible. I mean, we have one death between these two teams in Sanguine Depths as we're approaching this final section of the dungeon. It is so impressive because this dungeon, it is so hard. It is so hard to get through this dungeon without deaths. And I cannot overstate just how much every single one of these trash pulls was such a potential to wipe both of these teams. And great job so far by both of them to avoid that happening. Here they go. Both teams are now going to be skipping through through this triple pull here. It's going to be the usage of Mind Soothe, and then a bunch of different ways to get through here for all the different players, including, for Perplexed. Yeah, okay, so Divine is going to pull it to the side and run through and meld. The rest of the team needs to make sure they've stayed out of combat or also click their meld buttons, and looks like they've done it, but Piami have gotten that skip executed a little bit faster, and they have this Pride buff now to deploy on the start of the pull here, so advantage for Piami, definitely, as we're getting started with this gauntlet.
Yeah, and they also have that Pride buff as well, so they're going to be able to deal with this first pull quite a bit faster. One thing that there's still a difference with is the percentage. So Piami actually dealt with a little bit less trash in that ring area. I think it was like 2%. So they're going to have to deal with slightly more trash in this gauntlet area. I do think they also were the team that actually pulled a bet in at some point, so we're gonna have to keep an eye on that and to see what kind of trash they decide to pull extra. But now they're already done with that first initial Kyle pull. They are moving on to this lantern area where they're gonna be getting that buffs, while Perplex is still trying to deal with this first area. So incredibly close between those two teams still.
Yeah, it'll be so interesting to see what the difference is in the rest of this gauntlet as well, because teams have had different ideas for how to pull the very end of this gauntlet too. Whether you can combine those last two pulls or not, for instance, is a big deal. As you can see, Divine, wow, he's taking a lot of damage for Perplex as they are trying to set up this big pull on the Lantern. The Lantern has been activated. Divine is going to use Metamorphosis here to try and stay alive, and they've done it. They have killed off all that trash. It is just General Call that's left. Necrotic stacks have been mitigated. I think they were dropped there by File of Serenity for Perplexed. Piami are going to tag one last mob into that Lantern, refreshing their buffs up to the full 75 seconds, and they are taking this Dread Bat forward. They do need that bat, as you identified, Nagura, for the extra count that they missed earlier, and they are getting started with this third section of the Trash Gauntlet. They are not running ahead and pulling the rest of the area, though. There's that gargoyle that is further up ahead that they are going to leave by itself. So Perplexed can maybe sneak back into the lead here if they are able to go and grab that with this pull. Let's see if Divine is going to do it. Yes, he is. Look at that. He's going to leap forward, throwing his glaive aggressively, dropping that shield to have a little bit of safety to stand in. Don't try this at home, because if the gauntlet lasts for too long and General Call reaches her Gloom Burst cast and your shield is on cooldown, that is a sketchy situation as Divine is about to die there. Barely stays alive. The sack is going to come out on him as well. Bop used and immediately canceled to remove Necrotic stacks, but then of course you got to cancel it right away to make sure that the mobs don't then instantly melee the rest of your group there. Very well played though by Perplexed, as most of this trash has been dealt with. Divine is though still taking a lot of damage here. There's a lot of bolstering stacks on that Chamber Sentinel, and he is very low on health. He doesn't have Last Resort available. He doesn't have Meta available. They have phased General Call, so they're not going to have to worry about any of those Gloom Burst casts as Divine now runs up and gets started pulling the trash out of this little room there. They're casting a cage on one of the Stonewall Gargons, and they are running now through the room here at 98% count. Are they going to try and skip all of the trash here and just get right onto the like spawn the Pride and then get right onto the boss? Is that the idea, which Perplex is going for? Because look at this, they're at 98% count already, 100% for Piami. They are spawning their Pride already, and they are going to start killing it. What is Perplexed up to, though?
Yep. It looks like Perplex might be trying to skip the Pride and do the boss before and then pull the trash in after so they don't have to deal with it. But they have Bloodlust available, so usually this is worth it to do with the Pride. So this seems pretty slow on their side as they're now engaging the boss. They have General Call engaged as Piami is still dealing with that Pride. But there's so much damage on Divine Field as he has so much Necrotic stacks on him as well. They don't have Bob available from Ryzen as he's just jumping around trying to kite out the trash as he has so much Necrotic stacks on him. Bloodlust is being popped as well, and he's just trying to survive here as they're just finishing off the last trash percentage. You can see they're at 99%, so this Houndmaster is going to be the one last they have to deal with to proc the 100% Pride. This is so close between those two teams as Piami is already fighting Cal, but they can have so much damage because they have the Pride buff, and they also have the Bloodlust being popped as well, so General Cal is going to be dying any second for Piami now. Ryzen going down too.
Perplexes, this was such a bold pull by them. They tried to make this happen, but Piami are going to take the win here as they have gone into this boss with all of their cooldowns as Perplex are wiping and Piami have killed General Call and stamped their ticket to the Cup Finals.
Oh my goodness there, Piami taking the victory on PI Day, of course, on Pi Day, of course.
Jeez.
We are going to be moving on. I was waiting for it, all right, I was waiting for it. They take that victory at Sanguine with a flawless 0-death run, moving on to the finals there and absolutely stomping the competition this weekend. They've been so strong, and very much deserving the position they're in right now here, Zaro.
If we were on a physical desk somewhere, I would have thrown my pen at you for saying that.
Thankfully, you're only a 3-hour drive away.
2.5 if I go quickly.
Yeah, that's true.
No, speeding is not good, kids. Yeah, but the thing as well to mention here, not only was it a ridiculous run, look at the time. It was a minute 30 faster than the fastest run we've seen all weekend. Obey Alliance with a 20:30, we thought that was good. But just the cleanliness and execution coming out from PI Me in this dungeon really shows that this is one of those dungeons that they are just incredibly confident on.